Picture this, a winter's night in 1091. A priest walks alone on a dark road in Normandy. The wind howls, then he hears it. The thunder of hooves, the baying of hounds, voices crying out in anguish. He looks up to see a ghostly procession riding through the sky, soldiers, horsemen, corpses being carried, women screaming on horseback. When he reaches out to touch one of the horses as proof of what he's seeing, his hand begins to burn. This wasn't a nightmare. This was a documented account, one of hundreds spanning over 1,000 years, of something known across Europe as the Wild Hunt. Welcome back to Golden Cattle Media, where folklore, history, and legends intertwine. Today we're exploring one of Europe's most enduring and terrifying supernatural phenomena, a story that has been seen, reported, and feared from the age of Vikings to the present day. If you enjoy diving into ancient myths that refuse to die, be sure to subscribe. The Wild Hunt isn't just one story, it's a tapestry of legends woven across the entire European continent. From the frozen forests of Scandinavia to the misty moors of England, the deep woods of Germany to the rugged coasts of Brittany and Wales. To understand the Wild Hunt, we need to understand the world that gave birth to it. We're talking about medieval and pre-Christian Europe, a time when the barrier between the living and dead felt thin, when winter nights were long and dark, and when communities huddled around fires and told stories of what rode through the storm. These cultures were shaped by constant warfare, harsh winters, and a deep reverence for the supernatural. The Germanic peoples, the Norse, the Celts, all of them lived in landscapes where nature itself felt alive and often hostile. Forests were endless, mountains loomed, and when winter came, death came with it. In this world, the idea that the dead might not rest peacefully, that they might continue to ride, to hunt, to wander, wasn't just believable, it was expected. Let's return to that priest on the road in Normandy, because his story is one of the most detailed accounts we have. His name was Walchelin, and between 1135 and 1140, an English chronicler named Ordericus Vitalis recorded what Walchelin claimed to have witnessed in January of 1091 on a road between Bonville-sur-Torche and Saint-Aubin-des-Scroville. Walchelin described seeing the procession in stages. First came the foot soldiers, dozens of them marching in formation. Then horsemen appeared, warriors on spectral steeds. Behind them, pallbearers carried corpses. Then came women, screaming and suffering as they rode on the backs of horses. Following them were clergy, monks and priests, and finally knights in full armor. The most unsettling part, Walchelin recognized some of them. He saw people he knew, people who had died, including a priest he'd known personally. When Walchelin tried to grab the reins of one of the horses to take it as physical proof of what he was seeing, his hand was seared as if by fire. The burn, according to the account, marked him for the rest of his life. Now, while Walchelin's account is detailed, it shares common threads with hundreds of other reports of the Wild Hunt across Europe. The basic elements are almost always the same. A spectral hunting party, sometimes on the ground, more often in the sky, composed of riders, hounds, and the hunters who are clearly not of this world. The sound of horns, the baying of supernatural hounds, the thunder of hooves where no horses should be, and most importantly, the hunt is almost always a harbinger, an omen. To witness it is to know that death, misfortune, or great change is coming. But here's where it gets fascinating, because every culture that encountered the Wild Hunt made it their own. Germanic and Norse tradition, the leader of the hunt was none other than Odin himself, the All-Father, god of war, death, and wisdom. Odin would ride across the sky on his 8-legged horse, accompanied by souls of warriors who had died in battle, or sometimes by the Valkyrie themselves. The hunt would ride during Yule, the darkest time of winter, and many Germanic peoples would leave out offerings and food and drinks for the riders. Say the hunt could bring good fortune in the coming year, but to be caught by it could mean being dragged to the other world. After Christianization, the church couldn't erase these deeply rooted beliefs, so they transformed them. Odin was replaced in some tellings with figures like Berchtold or even Charlemagne, great leaders now condemned to hunt for eternity as punishment for their sins. In Wales, the Wild Hunt takes the form of the Cwn Annwn, which translates to the Hounds of Annwn. These weren't ordinary hunting dogs, they were described as pure white with bright red ears, and they belonged to the underworld itself. They were led by Gwynapneith and Arknon, the kings of the otherworld. The strangest detail, their howling was said to grow quieter as they drew closer, the exact opposite of earthly hounds. Imagine hearing that otherworldly baying growing fainter and fainter and knowing they were almost upon you. In Brittany, there's Anku's hunt. Ankun is the personification of death itself, a skeletal figure who drives a creaking cart and collects the souls of the dying. His hunt is death made manifest. England has its own version with Herne the Hunter, a ghostly figure wearing antlers and chains who haunts Windsor Forest. Some scholars believe that Herne is connected to Cernunnos, the Celtic god. There are dozens more. Somerset has Woden's hunt, Devon and Cornwall speak of the devil and his dandy dogs. And in Norway and Sweden, even after Christianity took hold, Odin remained the leader of the hunt in popular belief. Despite all these variations, the core message remains the same. The wild hunt rides, the dead do not rest, and to witness them is to stand next to the threshold between this world and the next. So what do we make of all this? Is there any historical reality behind these tales, or is this purely folklore? The truth is complex. While we obviously can't prove the existence of ghostly hunting parties, historians and folklorists have identified several possible explanations for how these legends developed and spread. First, there's the possibility of genuine misidentification. Medieval Europe was dark at night, truly dark in ways we can barely imagine today. Storms, migrating birds, atmospheric phenomena, all these could create sounds and sights that terrified people. The human mind, especially one steeped in existing folklore, fills in the gaps. You hear strange sounds in the storm, you see shadows moving, and your brain interprets it through the lens of stories you've been told since childhood. Second, there's the social and religious function of these stories serve. The wild hunt often appeared during liminal times, the winter solstice, the turning of the year, times when the veil between worlds was thought to be thin. These stories reinforced seasonal cycles, explaining their natural disasters, and gave communities a way to process death and the afterlife. Third, the transformation of legend after Christianization is telling. When pagan beliefs couldn't be stamped out, the church absorbed them and reframed them. Odin becomes a sinner condemned to hunt forever. The hunt becomes a warning against sin rather than a seasonal supernatural event. This kind of religious syncretism, blending old beliefs with the new ones, is common throughout European history. But what's genuinely fascinating, reports of the wild hunt didn't stop with the medieval period. They continued. They continue today. The wild hunt has left an indelible mark on European culture that extends far beyond old chronicles and folklore collections. In literature, it's everywhere. The Witcher series, the books by Andrzej Sapkowski, the games, the Netflix show, features the wild hunt prominently as a major threat, a spectral army from another world. Susan Cooper's The Dark is Rising includes it, Jim Butcher's Dresden Files features it, Neil Gaiman references it in American Gods, the list goes on. In music, the wild hunt has inspired countless songs, especially in the metal genres. Black metal, folk metal, and even Viking metal bands have drawn on this imagery extensively. But it goes beyond that. The classic Western song Ghost Riders in the Sky, written by Stan Jones in 1948, is essentially an American retelling of the wild hunt legend. Cowboys doomed to chase cattle across the sky forever? That's the wild hunt in 10-gallon hats. In film, the 2019 Hellboy movie featured the wild hunt directly, based on a comic book storyline. Numerous horror films and fantasy movies have drawn on its imagery and themes. But perhaps most importantly, the wild hunt remains embedded in local traditions across Europe. In parts of Scandinavia, people still speak of leaving offerings during Yule. Place names across Germany, England, and France reference the hunt. Ghost tours in England include stops at locations where Herne the Hunter is said to appear. The hunt has become a symbol of persistence of old beliefs, of the line between life and death, of nature's power, and the mysteries that remain just beyond our understanding. And here's the thing that makes the wild hunt more than just a historical curiosity. People still claim to see it. There are modern reports, particularly from rural areas of northern Europe, of people witnessing strange processions of lights in the sky, hearing the sounds of horns and hounds where no hunt should be, seeing shadowy riders on a winter's night. Are these genuine supernatural encounters, misidentifications, the power of suggestion? Paranormal investigators have attempted to study locations associated with the hunt, though concrete evidence remains elusive. Skeptics point to the psychological factors, pattern recognition, cultural conditioning, the human tendency to see what we expect to see. But believers counter that the consistency of reports across centuries and cultures suggests something more than mere imagination. Why would the same basic story, riders in the sky, supernatural hounds, omens of death, emerge independently in Norway, Wales, Germany, France, and England? Contemporary scholarship has largely moved away from trying to prove or disprove the hunt's literal existence. Instead, researchers focus on what the legend tells us about how cultures process death, change, and the unknown. So, what is the wild hunt really? Perhaps it's exactly what our ancestors believed, a genuine supernatural phenomenon, the dead continuing their eternal ride, visible only to those standing at the right place at the right time. Or perhaps it's something more metaphorical, a cultural memory of migration, of invasion, of the armies of the dead that all ancestors once marched with or fled from. Maybe the hunt is how pre-Christian Europe processed the violence and death that surrounded them, turning it into something sacred and terrible. There's also the possibility that the wild hunt represents some universal human experience. Every culture has stories of the restless dead, of spirits who cannot or will not rest. The wild hunt might be Northern Europe's particular expression of this universal theme, shaped by their forests, their winters, and their warrior cultures. What strikes me most is the hunt's persistent. Legends fade, gods are forgotten, but the wild hunt has endured for over 1,000 years and shows no sign of disappearing. It has adapted, transformed, moved into new media and new contexts, but the core remains the same. Riders in the storm, hounds baying, the dead refusing to rest. Maybe that's because, on some deep level, the hunt speaks to something true. Not necessarily true in the literal historical sense, but true about the human experience. About death, about the wilderness that exists just beyond the edge of civilization, about the mystery of what comes after. So what do you think? Is the wild hunt a genuine supernatural phenomenon that still rides today? A cultural memory transformed into legend, or simply a way our ancestors made sense of storms, death, and the unknown? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain on a dark winter night? Do you have wild hunt stories from your own region or family? If you enjoyed this journey into one of Europe's most enduring legends, please like this video and subscribe for more explorations of folklore, history, and the places where they meet. Until next time, some stories refuse to stay buried, and some hunts never end.